The fluorescent lights of Ward 4 Bravo hummed like distant hornets. The smell was institutional, antiseptic, floor wax, the particular staleness of a place where broken men came to heal. It was 0700 on a Tuesday morning at the Naval Medical Center in San Diego, and the ward was waking up to the sound of vitals monitors and suppressed groans. Reese Callahan moved through the space like a shadow. 28 years old, with auburn hair pulled back into a severe bun that made her look younger than she was. Her scrubs hung loose on a frame that seemed too small for the work she did. Her shoulders hunched forward. Her eyes stayed fixed on the clipboard in her hands, never meeting the stares of the men she served. The Marines called her Mouse. Staff Sergeant Cole Brennan said it first, 3 weeks into her rotation. He'd watched her drop a blood pressure cuff, watched her fumble to pick it up with trembling hands, and the name just stuck. It spread through the ward like wildfire, and corporals, privates, even the Army Rangers passing through on transfer picked it up. Mouse, quiet, timid, probably fresh out of some community college nursing program. That's what they figured. That's what they saw. A rookie who flinched at loud noises and checked IV drips with the uncertain movements of someone who'd never seen real combat medicine. They had no idea. Reese stopped at bed 3. Staff Sergeant Cole Brennan lay there with his left thigh wrapped in heavy bandages. A piece of shrapnel from a Helmand firefight still lodged too close to his femoral artery for the surgeons to risk removal. He was Force Recon, lean, scarred, with the kind of arrogance that came from surviving things that killed lesser men. "Morning, Princess," Cole drawled, not looking up from his tablet. "You gonna check my vitals, or you need me to do it myself? I know reading the big numbers is hard." Laughter rippled through the ward. Corporal Garrett Sullivan, a hulking man with a neck brace who looked like a linebacker who'd tackled a freight train, grinned from bed 5. "Give her a break, Viper," Garrett said, though there was no real sympathy in his voice. "First job jitters, right, Mouse?" Reese didn't respond. She adjusted the saline drip on bed 2, where Private Finn Walker lay recovering from an IED blast that had taken the ring and middle fingers of his left hand. 22 years old. Too young to have that kind of haunted look in his eyes. "Your blood pressure's elevated, Sergeant," Reese said softly. Her voice barely carried over the hum of air conditioning. "Try to relax." "I'd relax if we had a nurse who knew the difference between a saline drip and a tear duct," Cole shot back. He winced as he shifted his leg, but the grin never left his face. "This your first rodeo, Mouse? You ever see blood that wasn't from a paper cut?" Reese's hand paused over her pen. For just a fraction of a second, something flickered behind her eyes. A hardness, a cold, distant calculation. Her shoulders stiffened, her jaw tightened, and the air around her seemed to change frequency. Then it was gone. She hunched her shoulders again, made herself small, and whispered, "I'm just here to do my job, Sergeant." Yeah. Just don't faint when you change my bandages later. I've got scars that look scarier than your boyfriend." Reese moved to the next patient. The laughter of the Marines followed her like bad cologne. Out in the hallway, she stopped, pressed her back against the cold tile wall, closed her eyes, counted backward from 10. 10, 9, 8. Her hand wasn't trembling because she was scared. It was trembling because of the adrenaline she was forcing herself to suppress. The muscle memory she was drowning in deliberate clumsiness. The instincts she was burying under layers of performance. If Cole Brennan only knew. If he knew that the community college she'd supposedly attended was actually the Naval Special Warfare Center. That her classroom was the surf zone at Coronado. That her textbooks were demolition manuals and combat medicine protocols. If he knew she'd been one of 2 women in BUD/S Class 301. If he knew, 4 years earlier. The Pacific Ocean was a black wall of freezing fury. Reese Callahan, 24 years old, stood chest-deep in the surf with her arms locked above her head, holding a telephone pole with 5 other candidates. The log weighed 200 pounds when it was dry. Wet and covered in sand, it felt like 1,000. Surf torture. The instructors called it character building. The candidates called it hell. A wave crashed over them. Salt water filled Reese's mouth, her nose, her lungs. She couldn't breathe, couldn't see. The world was cold and dark, and the log was slipping, and her arms were screaming, and her legs were numb. "Callahan!" The voice cut through the roar of the ocean like a blade. Instructor Lyle Creed, 6'3", 220 pounds of scar tissue and bad intentions. You dropping that log means your team drops that log. You want to be the reason 5 good men fail. Reese's vision tunneled. Black spots danced at the edges. Her body was shutting down. Hypothermia was setting in. "No, instructor," she gasped. "Then lock it the fuck up, candidate." She locked it up. Another wave. Another. The ocean tried to kill her 18 times in that hour. She didn't let it. When Instructor Creed finally called time, when they dropped the log and collapsed onto the sand like broken puppets, Reese didn't cry, didn't complain. She just lay there staring at the gray California sky, feeling her heart hammer against her ribs. Creed stood over her, looked down with something that might have been respect. "Not bad, Callahan," he said. "For a girl." She would remember that moment, that look, the way he believed in her when everyone else expected her to quit. She would remember it 2 years later when everything went to hell. 2 years earlier, Kandahar Province, Afghanistan. Zero Dark 30, the kind of mission that didn't officially exist. Reese was Reaper 6, the combat medic embedded with a SEAL element tasked with extracting a high-value intelligence asset from a Taliban compound. 8 operators, in and out, clean. It wasn't clean. The compound was supposed to be lightly defended. Intelligence said 4 hostiles, maybe 5. Intel was wrong. 20 fighters, heavy weapons. The extraction turned into a firefight that lit up the night like the 4th of July. Reese was pinned down in a second-floor room with her spotter, Petty Officer Marcus Grant. 31 years old, father of 2, had a tattoo of a compass on his forearm with the words, "Always find home," underneath. "Reaper 6, this is Overwatch," the voice crackled in her earpiece. "We've got your position marked. Air support is 3 mics out, but they're danger close. Repeat, danger close. You need to mark your position with IR strobes and get to the roof for extract." Marcus looked at her, blood running down his face from shrapnel, his left arm hanging useless. "You call it, Reese," he said. "I trust you." She called it. The airstrike came in like the wrath of God. 500-pound JDAM through the center of the compound. The building shook, fire and smoke and screaming. Reese and Marcus made it to the roof. The team made it out. But the compound wasn't empty. 3 civilians, shepherds. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong night. The after-action report was brutal. Congressional inquiry, media shitstorm. The female SEAL pilot program was already controversial, and now it had a body count. Civilian casualties, American bombs. Someone had to take the fall. Instructor Lyle Creed was the ground commander. He'd approved Reese's airstrike call. When the politicians came asking questions, when careers were on the line, Creed testified that the decision was operationally sound, but tactically questionable. He blamed her, not directly, not explicitly, but enough. Creed got a dishonorable discharge, lost his pension, lost everything. Reese got survivor's guilt and a closed-door meeting with Rear Admiral Douglas Hawk. "The program's dead, Callahan," Hawk had said. 60 years old, with eyes like granite and a chest full of medals that told stories he'd never speak aloud. "Congress is shutting us down. Too much heat, too much politics. You've got a choice. Dishonorable discharge and a non-disclosure agreement, or a quiet transfer to the Medical Corps. Clean slate, new identity. We scrub your record." "What about Marcus?" Reese had asked. "What about the team?" "Marcus Grant is recovering. The team doesn't blame you. I don't blame you. But the world doesn't care about the truth, Lieutenant. It cares about the narrative." Reese chose the Medical Corps. She needed the pension. She needed the quiet. She needed to save lives instead of taking them. She needed to atone. Present day. Reese finished her morning rounds at 0900, checked vitals, distributed medications, endured the usual barrage of insults disguised as banter. Cole Brennan asked if she'd ever seen a real war wound. Garrett Sullivan made a joke about her probably fainting during her first Code Blue. She smiled, nodded, played the part. At 1000, Lieutenant Commander Margot Hayes found her in the break room. Hayes was 50 years old, with steel gray hair pulled into a regulation bun, and the kind of bureaucratic coldness that came from 30 years of Navy nursing. All rules, no empathy. "Callahan," Hayes said, not bothering with pleasantries, "we've got a VIP transfer coming in. High security case, private military contractor. I'm putting you on his rotation." Reese frowned. "Why me, ma'am? Usually Lieutenant Evans handles VIPs." "Evans is on leave, and frankly, Callahan, you're passive. You won't argue with difficult patients. Keep your head down, mouth shut. Security's tight on this one, marshals and private contractors." "Who is he?" "Name's Volkov, Nikolai Volkov, PMC operator who got shot up in Venezuela. That's all you need to know." Venezuela. "Private military." That meant messy work, off-the-books operations, the kind of thing that left bodies in unmarked graves. Reese felt something cold crawl up her spine. "Understood, ma'am." Nikolai Volkov arrived at 1400 hours in a convoy that looked more like a military op than a medical transfer. 2 black SUVs, 4 men in dark suits. They weren't U.S. Marshals. Marshals wore badges and carried Glocks. These men had the wrong shoes. Tactical soles disguised as dress loafers. The bulge under the left armpit of the tall one wasn't a service pistol. Too compact, too angular. MP7, Reese thought, submachine gun. Why would hospital security need that kind of firepower? She kept her head down, clipboard clutched to her chest. To them, she was just another nurse in scrubs, invisible. But she'd already cataloged their weapons, noted the way they moved, marked the exits they were watching. Old habits. Volkov himself was a rough-looking man in his mid-40s, face like granite left on a gravel road, 3 gunshot wounds to the torso, sutured and angry red. He was handcuffed to the bed rail when Reese entered his room in the solarium wing. "You got a name, sweet cheeks?" Volkov rasped. His voice sounded like wet gravel. "Nurse Callahan," Reese said, adjusting his IV. She didn't look him in the eye. "You look soft," Volkov muttered. "You wouldn't last 5 minutes where I came from." "Likely not, sir." Volkov was quiet for a moment. Then his eyes sharpened. The drug haze cleared. When he spoke again, his voice was different, lucid, urgent. "They're coming," he whispered. Reese froze. "Who?" "My old partners, the company. Blackridge PMC. I know too much about the accounts, about the senator, about where the bodies are buried. I'm supposed to testify next week. They're not going to let that happen." Reese checked his heart monitor. Steady rhythm. He wasn't hallucinating. "You're safe here, Mr. Volkov. There are federal agents outside your door." Volkov laughed, a dry, hacking sound that turned into a cough. "2 suits and a kid with a badge? Lady, the team they're sending eats feds for breakfast. They'll cut the power, jam the comms, breach from the stairwell and elevator simultaneously. Speed, surprise, violence of action. It'll be a slaughter." Reese stared at him. He'd just described a textbook Tier 1 direct action breach, cut power, disable communications, dual entry points, overwhelming force. She'd run that drill 100 times. At 1700 hours, Reese sat at the nurse's station computer terminal. She wasn't authorized to access building security schematics, but she knew the admin password. She'd watched Dr. Henderson type it in 3 weeks ago, Blue Falcon 1987. She logged in. Maintenance logs, CCTV server status, building access records. Log entry 1845, unscheduled maintenance crew checked in for HVAC repair, roof access. Log entry 1910, CCTV server 4, East Wing. Reported intermittent signal loss. The East Wing was directly above them. HVAC repair, at night, on a Tuesday. Reese picked up the desk phone, dialed security. "This is Callahan in 4 Bravo. Can you confirm the work order for the roof crew?" Static. A yawn. One sec, nurse. I don't see a work order here. Wait, that's weird. My screen just—" The line went dead. Reese's blood turned to ice. She stood up, walked quickly across the ward to where Cole Brennan was watching a football game on his tablet, volume too loud. "Brennan," she said. "Not Sergeant, not Sir, just his name. Flat. Hard." Cole looked up, surprised by the tone. "What?" "Shut up and listen to me." Cole blinked. "What the hell are you—" "How many of your boys can walk?" "What are you talking about? Why are you—" Clunk. The sound came from the elevator shaft down the hall, heavy, metallic, distant. Then came a sound Reese knew better than her own heartbeat. Pop, pop, suppressed gunfire. Double tap. Professional. The bored MP outside Volkov's room didn't even scream. Reese heard the body hit the floor. "Brennan!" she hissed. Her voice was different now. Command voice. The voice of someone who'd led men under fire. "I need you to barricade the main doors. Use the heavy equipment cart. Do it now." "Nurse, are you crazy? It's probably just a—" The lights died. Emergency backup lights flickered on, bathing Ward 4 Bravo in a bloody red glow. Reese didn't shuffle, didn't hunch. She vaulted over the nurse's station counter with fluid, predatory grace, grabbed trauma shears from the desk, ripped her ID badge off, and tossed it into the trash. Cole Brennan watched, jaw slack, as the timid little nurse moved like a trained killer. Reese crouched beside his bed, grabbed him by the front of his hospital gown, yanked him close. Her eyes, usually soft and evasive, now burned with terrifying intensity. "If you want to live," she said, her voice cold as winter, "you will do exactly what I say. Get Sullivan up, move the beds, create a funnel at the door. Do you understand me, Marine?" Cole stared at her. He saw something in her face he'd only seen once before. In Helmand. In his platoon sergeant's eyes, right before they breached a Taliban stronghold, the look of a killer. "Yes," Cole stammered. "Yes, ma'am." "Good." Reese stood, turned, sprinted toward the supply closet. She didn't need bandages. She needed weapons. And in a hospital, everything was a weapon if you knew how to use it. The mouse was gone. The Reaper had returned. The supply closet smelled like iodine and latex. Reese moved through it with purpose, her hands steady now, the trembling gone. She wasn't a frightened nurse anymore. She was a combat medic with a mission. 4 scalpels. She taped them to her thighs with surgical tape, positioning them for quick access. Blade edges outward. The weight was familiar, comforting. A scalpel wasn't much of a weapon, but in the right hands it was enough. A pressurized canister of pure oxygen. She checked the valve. Full capacity. 3,000 psi. More than enough. A lighter she'd confiscated from a patient 2 days ago. She pocketed it. Improvised explosive device. Check. She grabbed a syringe from the locked medication cabinet. Succinylcholine. Paralytic agent. Rapid onset. 30 seconds from injection to complete muscle paralysis. Respiratory failure if the dose was high enough. Reese filled the syringe, capped it, slipped it into her breast pocket. She moved to the door, cracked it open an inch. Down the hall, near the VIP suite, shadows were moving. Professional. Deliberate. She counted 6 figures in the red emergency lighting. Black tactical gear. Full face masks, night vision goggles mounted on their helmets. They moved in a tight stack formation, each man covering a sector, weapons at the ready. These weren't amateurs. A voice crackled over a radio. Clear, calm. Room 402 clear. Moving to primary target. They weren't here for the Marines. They were here for Volkov. But Ward 4 Bravo was between the elevators and the solarium wing. The Marines were witnesses, loose ends. These men were cleaners. They wouldn't leave witnesses. Reese took a slow breath, visualized the layout, the drop ceiling. She'd noticed it 3 weeks ago during her orientation. Standard acoustic tiles on aluminum rails. 18 inches of crawl space above. Enough room for a small person to move through if they were careful. She climbed onto the shelving unit, pushed aside a ceiling tile, pulled herself up into the darkness above. The space was tight. Dust and insulation and electrical conduit. She crawled on her elbows and knees, dragging her body across the aluminum framework, making no more noise than a rat in the walls. Below her, through the gaps in the tiles, she could see them advancing. 2 men peeled off from the main group, heading toward the double doors of Ward 4 Bravo. She could hear Cole and Garrett on the other side, moving beds, creating the barricade she'd ordered. The 2 mercenaries stopped directly beneath her position. "You take left, I take right," one whispered. American accent, Midwest, probably Michigan or Ohio. Reese positioned herself, reached into her pocket, found the syringe. Patience. Wait for the separation. The rear mercenary shifted his weight, adjusted his rifle sling, exposed the gap between his Kevlar collar and his neck. Reese kicked the ceiling tile out. She didn't fall. She launched. 200 pounds of tactical gear and trained killer. She landed on his shoulders like a hawk on a rabbit. The impact buckled his knees. Before he could shout, before his partner could turn, she jammed the syringe into the soft tissue of his neck and depressed the plunger. Full dose. He made a sound like a broken accordion. His legs went out from under him. Reese rode him to the floor, controlling his descent, keeping him quiet. The second mercenary spun, saw his partner down, saw Reese. He raised his suppressed AR-15. Reese was faster. She swept his leg with a vicious kick that cracked bone. Fibula, probably. He went down hard. The rifle clattered across the floor. He was strong, much stronger than her. He punched her in the face, a jarring blow that split her lip and filled her mouth with copper. Reese didn't flinch. She used the momentum of his punch to spin inside his guard, drove the heel of her palm upward toward his nose. He was wearing a ballistic mask. The strike stunned him, but didn't drop him. He fumbled for his sidearm. Reese grabbed a scalpel from her thigh. She didn't hesitate. The brachial artery runs through the armpit, in the gap where body armor doesn't cover. Reese knew the anatomy like she knew her own name. She drove the blade in, felt the resistance, felt the give, felt the hot spray across her hand. The mercenary dropped. Blood pooled on the pristine white floor. Dark, almost black in the red emergency lighting. Reese stood, grabbed his rifle, AK-416. Civilian legal semi-auto converted to select fire, illegal as hell and worth more than her annual salary. She checked the chamber, hot, ready. She claimed his tactical vest, too big, but she cinched it tight. His radio, his sidearm, a Glock 19 with an extended magazine, 2 down. She turned toward the double doors of Ward 4 Bravo. Inside the ward, Cole Brennan was holding a metal IV pole like a spear. His hands were shaking, not from fear, from adrenaline, from the knowledge that whatever was happening out there, it was bad. Garrett Sullivan had dragged 3 beds into a V formation facing the door. Finn Walker was wide-eyed, clutching a fire extinguisher like it was a rifle. They heard the scuffle outside, the thuds, the terrible heavy silence that followed. "They're coming," Finn whispered. The double doors hissed open. Cole raised his makeshift spear. His knuckles were white. A figure stepped through. It was Reese, covered in dust and blood, holding an assault rifle at low ready, finger indexed along the trigger guard with perfect discipline. She wore a tactical vest over her scrubs, magazines, and equipment hanging from the webbing. Her face was expressionless, cold. She looked at Cole. "Sergeant Brennan," she said. Her voice was calm, command voice. "I need you to take this sidearm and watch the rear exit. If that door opens and it's not me, you put 2 rounds center mass, 1 in the head. Do you copy?" Cole's jaw dropped. He stared at the Glock she was offering him, then at her face. The shy, clumsy nurse was gone. Standing in her place was a warrior. "Copy that, Doc," Cole whispered. "Good." Reese turned back toward the hallway, stopped, looked over her shoulder. "And Brennan, when this is over, you can tell me all about how I wouldn't last 5 minutes in a real fight." Cole almost smiled. She disappeared into the darkness. The hallway of the East Wing was a fatal funnel. Narrow, no cover. Anyone moving through it was exposed. The Marines had a word for it. Kill box. Reese pressed herself into the alcove of the janitor's station, 50 feet from Ward 4 Bravo. The HK-416 felt familiar in her hands. Ghost of a past life. She'd qualified expert with the M4 platform. This was close enough. She checked the magazine. 24 rounds left. A voice crackled in her earpiece. The radio she'd taken from the dead mercenary. "Echo team, report. Status on the rear flank." Reese stayed silent. If she spoke, they'd know. Female voice. Compromised frequency. They'd adapt. Let them panic. "Echo 2, Echo 3, sound off." Silence was a weapon. Down the hall, 3 beams of tactical flashlights cut through the red gloom, moving in bounding overwatch. 1 man moves, 2 cover. Standard infantry doctrine. These weren't street thugs. They were professionals. Probably former Special Operations, Delta, DevGru, SAS, working for the highest bidder now. Reese looked at the oxygen canister at her feet. She'd cracked the valve open just enough to release a slow, steady stream of pure O2 into the corridor. Colorless, odorless, highly combustible. She waited. The point man was 20 feet away. 15. 10. He stopped, scanned the alcove. His flashlight beam hit the canister. "Contact! I see a—" Reese stepped out. She didn't aim at the man. She aimed at the wall behind the oxygen tank, fired a single round into the steel doorframe. The spark from the bullet impact ignited the oxygen-rich pocket. The explosion wasn't high order, not C4, but in a confined space, a deflagration was enough. The fireball consumed the oxygen instantly. The concussion wave slammed the 3 men backward like bowling pins. The heat was intense, melting plastic, singeing eyebrows, destroying their night vision optics. Reese moved through the smoke. The point man was on the ground, writhing, blind, disoriented. Reese put 2 rounds into his chest plate. The ceramic shattered. 3rd round through the ocular cavity. He stopped moving. The second man was scrambling to his feet, coughing, rifle lost in the blast. He reached for a knife. Reese slung the rifle, drew her last scalpel, closed the distance in 2 strides. He lunged. She parried, stepped inside his guard, drove the blade into the side of his neck, the carotid artery. He grabbed her scrub top, eyes wide with shock, blood bubbling from his mouth. "Shh," she whispered, easing him to the floor. "It's almost over." The 3rd man, the team leader, had been further back. He'd recovered, raised his weapon, fired blindly into the smoke. Bullets chipped tile next to Reese's head. She dove through the open door of room 405. An empty patient room. "Contact! Man down! We have a hostile!" The leader screamed into his radio. "It's not the marshals. It's a pro. Repeat. We have a professional in play." Reese lay prone behind a hospital bed. Her heart hammered. Her hands were steady. She checked herself for injuries. A graze on her left arm. Bleeding, but not critical. She keyed the radio, let them hear her voice for the first time. "To whom it may concern," she said, her tone conversational, almost pleasant. "You're trespassing. Leave now and you might live. Stay and you won't." Silence on the radio, then a voice. Deep, familiar. A voice she hadn't heard in 2 years. "Well, well, Reese Callahan. The ghost of Kandahar. I should have known." Reese's blood turned to ice. She knew that voice. "Hello, Lyle," she said quietly. Captain Lyle Creed, her instructor from BUD/S, the man who'd pushed her hardest, the man who'd believed in her, the man who'd lost everything because of her. "Funny thing, Reese," Creed said. "I heard you washed out, went soft, became a nurse. Guess the rumors were wrong." "You didn't have to do this, Lyle." "Didn't I?" His voice was bitter, poisonous. "You ruined my career, my life. dishonorable discharge, no pension, all because you couldn't handle the heat in Kandahar. Someone had to take the fall. Congress made sure it was me. I never testified against you. You didn't have to. The fact that you were there, that a woman made the call, that was enough. The politicians needed a scapegoat. They got one. So now you're killing for money? Is that what you've become? Creed laughed, a cold, empty sound. I'm surviving, Reese. Something you should have learned by now. Tonight, I finish the job. Volkov dies. The witnesses die. And you? You're the bonus round. Reese moved through the ceiling again. The hallway was compromised. She needed to reach Volkov before Creed did. She dropped down into the linen closet adjacent to the solarium, heard voices through the wall. Secure the perimeter. We're taking losses, but the timeline holds. The bird is inbound in 10 mics. A second voice, accented, South African. Eliminate the target and burn the floor. Burn the floor. Thermite or white phosphorus. Cover the evidence. Every patient in Ward 4 Bravo would burn alive. Reese's eyes narrowed. She moved to the glass doors of the solarium. Frosted glass. 2 silhouettes standing over Volkov's bed. She didn't breach immediately. She picked up the phone at the nurse's station. Dialed the code for the overhead speakers in the solarium only. Attention, she whispered into the microphone. Inside, the 2 mercenaries jumped, spun, looked at the ceiling speakers. You are trespassing. Leave now and you live. Stay and you die. One of them laughed nervously. Who is this? Show yourself. Reese kicked the door open, rolled a flashbang across the floor. The stun grenade detonated. Brilliant white light. Deafening crack. The glass partition shattered. Reese flowed into the room like water. Double tap. Double tap. 2 to the head of the first guard. 2 to the chest of the second. She was at Volkov's bedside before the second body hit the floor. Volkov stared at her, terrified. You, he rasped. The nurse. The mouse. We're past that, Reese said. She used keys from the dead guard's belt to unlock his handcuffs. Can you walk? My leg. I took a hit. Of course you did. She hauled him up. Dead weight. Heavier than expected. Who are you? Volkov gasped. CIA? SAD? Navy? Navy, Reese said simply. We have to move. They're going to torch the building. They made it 5 feet before Creed's voice boomed down the hallway. Reese, I know you can hear me. I've got something you want. Reese stopped, looked through the broken glass toward Ward 4 Bravo. Her blood ran cold. Creed stood in the doorway, 6'3", armored, holding Private Finn Walker by the throat, a pistol pressed to the kid's temple. Finn's eyes were wide with terror. You remember Finn, don't you? Creed called. 22 years old, missing 2 fingers, probably misses his mom. Let's make sure he gets to see her again. Drop your weapon. Walk out here, or I paint the walls with his brains. Reese looked at Volkov. Can you stand? Barely. Good enough. She helped him to cover behind the nurse's station. Then she stepped into the hallway, rifle still in her hands. You won't do it, Lyle, she said. You're a lot of things, but you're not a murderer. Wrong, Reese. I'm exactly that now. Thanks to you. 5 seconds. 4. 3. Inside Ward. 4 Bravo, Cole Brennan whispered. Take the shot. Reese looked at him through the doorway, saw something in his eyes. Trust. Faith. The distance was 40 yards. Moving target, handgun. Impossible shot. Reese raised the Glock. Steady. Breathed out. Squeezed. The shot echoed like thunder. Creed's shoulder exploded. The bullet severed his radial nerve. His hand went limp instantly. The gun fell from nerveless fingers before he could pull the trigger, even if he'd wanted to. He dropped Finn. Screamed. Dove into cover, bleeding. Furious. Finn scrambled away into Cole's arms. Nice shot, Creed snarled over the radio, but it won't be enough. Suddenly, the ventilation system roared to life. A hissing sound filled the corridors. Halon gas, fire suppression. Fire. Reese had convinced the hospital engineer to trigger it remotely. The heavy, inert gas flooded the hallways, starving fires of oxygen. It also starved human beings. Down the corridor, the remaining mercenaries began to choke. They hadn't brought gas masks. This was supposed to be a quick, wet work job. But inside Ward 4 Bravo, the door was sealed. Wet towels stuffed under the cracks. The Marines had oxygen masks from the wall units. They would survive. The mercenaries wouldn't. Reese pulled Volkov back toward the ward, dragged him through the gas, both wearing masks. She pounded on the metal doors with the rifle butt. "Brennan, it's me! Open up!" The barricade shifted. Cole pulled the door open. Reese shoved Volkov into Garrett's arms. "Listen up." She addressed the room. 8 Marines, mobile and bedridden, all looking at her like she was Joan of Arc. "Bad news, there are still hostiles out there. Good news, they're choking on halon gas. But the system cycles off in 3 minutes. When the air clears, they're coming. And they know we're here." She walked to the supply cabinet, kicked it open, pulled out bottles of rubbing alcohol, peroxide, cotton bandages. "We don't have ammo, so we make cocktails. Who here knows how to make a Molotov?" Finn raised his hand, 3 fingers. "I was a bartender in Philly before I enlisted. You're up. Alcohol bottles, rag wicks, lighters." She turned to Cole. "I need a kill zone. V-shaped funnel from the door. If they breach, they walk into a crossfire." "We only have 2 guns, Doc." Reese slammed the HK-416 onto the desk, ejected the magazine. 12 rounds left. I have the Glock with 7 and this." She pulled the last flashbang from her pocket. "This is the Alamo, isn't it?" Garrett asked quietly. Reese looked at him, at all of them. Broken, battered, brave. The Alamo didn't have a seal. The room went silent. Cole stared. "Seal? You? Long story. Buy me a drink later. Right now, get ready." The lights flickered. The ventilation hummed back to life. The halon was clearing. From the hallway, a voice. Creed's voice. Amplified. Furious. "Reese Callahan, I know you're in there. I know you're out of options. So here's mine. You and me, hallway. 1-on-1. No weapons, no tricks. Just 2 operators settling accounts. You win, we leave. I win, everyone dies. You've got 60 seconds to decide." Reese looked at the Marines, at Cole, at Finn, at Garrett, at the men she'd sworn to protect. She picked up a scalpel, taped it to her wrist under her sleeve. "Stay here," she said. "No matter what you hear. Doc, you can't—" "That's an order, Sergeant." She walked toward the door. Cole grabbed her arm. "Reese, don't do this." She looked at him, really looked at him, saw the respect in his eyes, the fear, the brotherhood. "I have to," she said quietly. "It's the only way." She stepped into the hallway. The door closed behind her. In the red emergency lighting, Captain Lyle Creed waited, and the mouse walked into the lion's den. The hallway was silent, except for the hum of emergency lighting and the distant wail of approaching sirens. Police, federal agents. Help was coming, but not fast enough. Captain Lyle Creed stood 40 feet away. He'd stripped down to black fatigues and a combat knife. His left shoulder was soaked with blood from Reese's impossible shot, but he moved like the wound meant nothing. He'd always been tough. The instructors at BUD/S had called him Iron Lyle, the man who never quit, never broke. Reese had admired him once. "No rifle?" Creed said. His voice echoed off the walls. "No fancy tricks? Just you and me, Callahan. The way it should have been." Reese stood with empty hands. The scalpel taped to her wrist was hidden beneath her sleeve, her last resort. "This doesn't have to happen, Lyle. You can walk away." Creed laughed, bitter, hollow. "Walk away to what? A dishonorable discharge and a pension I'll never see? A life where every door is closed because of what you did?" He spat blood onto the floor. "You took everything from me, Reese. Tonight, I take something from you. I never testified against you. You didn't have to." The words came out like a roar. "You were the proof, the woman who made the call. The one they could point to and say, 'This is why females don't belong.' You were the excuse they needed to burn me." Reese took a slow breath. She thought of Marcus Grant's last words on that Kandahar rooftop. "Don't let the bastards win. Keep fighting." She'd promised. Tonight, she was keeping that promise. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "Sorry doesn't cut it." Creed moved, fast for a man his size. 3 long strides. The knife came up in a reverse grip, aimed for her throat. Reese sidestepped. The blade whistled past her ear. She countered with a palm strike to his wounded shoulder. Creed grunted but didn't slow. He grabbed her by the throat with his free hand, slammed her against the wall. The impact drove the air from her lungs. Stars burst in her vision. "You know what the worst part is?" Creed hissed, his face inches from hers. "I believed in you. I pushed you when everyone else wanted you to fail, and you repaid me by letting me take the fall." Reese drove her knee into his ribs. Once, twice. He released her throat. She dropped low, swept his leg. He went down hard but rolled, came up ready. They circled each other. Predators. Creed feinted left, struck right. The knife grazed Reese's forearm. Blood welled. She didn't feel it. Adrenaline was a hell of a drug. She thought of the Marines in Ward 4 Bravo. Cole, Garrett, Finn, the men she'd sworn to protect. Creed came at her again, the knife aimed low, going for the femoral artery. Reese blocked with her forearm. Pain exploded. The blade cut deep. But she'd positioned the block to deflect, not stop. The momentum carried Creed past her. She grabbed the scalpel from her wrist, spun, drove it into the back of his knee. Not a kill shot, a mobility shot. Creed roared, went down on one leg. But he wasn't done. He grabbed her ankle, yanked hard. Reese hit the floor, her head bounced off tile, the world went white. Creed crawled on top of her, 220 pounds of muscle and rage. The knife came down toward her chest. Reese caught his wrist with both hands, held it there, inches from her heart. Her arms shook. He was stronger, heavier. "You should have died in Kandahar," Creed snarled. "Not Marcus, not me. You." Reese looked into his eyes, saw the pain there, the betrayal. "You're right," she whispered. Creed blinked, surprised. "I wanted to die, but Marcus told me not to waste the life he gave me, so I won't." She bucked her hips, used his weight against him, rolled him off. The knife clattered away. They both scrambled to their feet. No weapons now, just fists and fury and broken bodies. Creed swung, a haymaker that would have taken her head off. Reese ducked, drove her fist into his wounded shoulder. He screamed. She followed with an elbow to his jaw. His head snapped back, but he didn't go down. He grabbed her in a bear hug, lifted her off her feet, slammed her into the wall, once, twice. Reese felt ribs crack, heard the sound like dry wood breaking. She couldn't breathe, couldn't see straight. Black spots danced in her vision. Then she heard Cole's voice, distant, muffled through the door. "Come on, Doc, don't you quit?" Reese drove her thumbs into Creed's eyes, brutal, desperate. He released her with a howl of pain. She dropped to the floor, gasping. Creed was on his knees, bleeding, blinded, broken. Reese crawled behind him, got her arm around his throat. Rear naked choke, textbook, the way they'd taught her at BUD/S, the way Creed himself had taught her. "I'm sorry, Lyle," she whispered, "for everything." Creed struggled, clawed at her arm, but the choke was locked in. Blood flowed to the brain cut off. 10 seconds. 8. 6. His last words were a whisper. "You'll never be free of Kandahar." "I know," Reese said, "but I'm done running from it." Creed went limp. Reese held the choke for 3 more seconds, then released. Let his body slump to the floor. She checked for a pulse. Faint. Thready. But there. He would live. Probably spend the rest of his life in Leavenworth. But he would live. Reese stood slowly. The hallway tilted. Broken ribs, concussion, blood loss catching up with her. Her vision swam. Footsteps, heavy boots, tactical teams flooding the corridor. "Federal agents! Hands where we can see them! Drop any weapons!" Reese raised her bloody hands, swayed on her feet. Through the open doorway of Ward 4 Bravo, Bravo, she saw Cole Brennan. He was standing now, leaning on Garrett Sullivan. His face was pale, but his eyes were bright. He mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." Reese tried to smile. The world grayed at the edges. Her knees buckled. The last thing she felt was the cold tile against her cheek. Then, darkness. FBI Field Office, San Diego. 2 hours later, Reese woke to fluorescent lights and the metallic taste of blood in her mouth. Her wrists were zip-tied in front of her. She sat in a metal chair in an interrogation room that was designed to break people. Cold, sterile. The two-way mirror hummed with the presence of unseen watchers. She was still wearing her blood-soaked scrubs. Special Agent Miller sat across the table. 50s, tired, angry. He slammed a thick folder onto the metal surface. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "Who are you?" Miller demanded. "And don't give me the Reese Callahan nurse story. We ran your prints through AFIS. Nothing. Retinal scan. Nothing. You're a ghost." Reese stared at a spot on the wall behind his head. Her voice was flat. "I'm a nurse who got lucky." Miller laughed, a harsh bark. "Lucky? Lady, I've seen the crime scene photos. You took out 6 men with a scalpel and an oxygen tank. That's not luck. That's professional tradecraft." He leaned forward. "You're going down for murder. 4 counts, maybe more, unless you start talking. Who do you work for? Foreign intelligence? Cartel? Are you some rogue CIA asset?" Reese finally met his eyes. Her gaze was unnervingly calm. "I want my phone call." "You don't get a call. You're a domestic terrorist suspect until proven otherwise." Reese sighed, leaned forward slowly. "Agent Miller, if you don't let me make this call, you're going to lose your pension. You're going to be reassigned to a desk in North Dakota counting paper clips. And you're going to spend the next 20 years wondering why you ignored basic protocol." Miller blinked. The specificity of the threat threw him off. "Is that a threat?" "It's a tactical assessment. Dial the number. Washington, D.C. area code, extension 49er Alpha Zulu." Miller hesitated, looked at the mirror, then back at Reese. Something in her voice, that absolute, unwavering authority, it terrified him more than the dead bodies. He pulled out his phone, dialed, put it on speaker. "Pentagon switchboard, secure line." "This is Special Agent Miller, FBI San Diego. I have a detainee requesting code." The voice interrupted. "Authentication code." Miller looked at Reese. She whispered, "Alpha Zulu 49er." Miller repeated it into the phone. There was a click. Silence. Then a new voice. Deep, resonant, command voice. "Secure the room. Hold position. We are inbound. ETA 90 seconds. The line went dead. Miller stared at the phone. Who the hell was that? He didn't have to wait long to find out. The steel door didn't open. It was kicked open. 2 MPs in full combat gear stepped through, flanked the entrance, stood at rigid attention. "Room 10 Hut." Agent Miller stood automatically, confusion written across his face. A man walked in, navy dress blues, gold stripes on his sleeve running all the way to his elbow, stars on his collar. Rear Admiral Douglas Hawk, 58 years old, living legend. The man who planned operations that made the news 5 years after they happened. The air in the room seemed to vanish. Hawk walked past Miller like the FBI agent was furniture, stopped in front of Reese, looked at her bruises, the cut on her lip, the zip ties digging into her wrists. His jaw tightened. Slowly, deliberately, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a knife. "Sir, you can't arm the prisoner." "Stand down, Agent." Hawk's voice could have frozen steel. He cut the zip ties. They fell to the floor. Reese rubbed her wrists, stood slowly. She was 4 inches shorter than the Admiral, but she met his gaze with equal intensity. Then Admiral Douglas Hawk, a 2-star admiral, snapped a crisp salute. "Lieutenant Commander Callahan, status." Reese returned the salute, sharp, precise. "Mission accomplished, Admiral. Assets secure. Hostiles neutralized. Casualties among friendly forces minimal." Miller's mouth hung open. "Lieutenant Commander, she's a nurse." Hawk turned to Miller. His face was granite. Agent, you are looking at Lieutenant Commander Reese Callahan, first female graduate of the Naval Special Warfare Development Group Tactical Integration Program, Tier 1 operator with qualifications in combat medicine, irregular warfare, and counterterrorism. He paused. Let it sink in. And for the past 2 years, she's been deep undercover in our medical corps. Deep cover? Miller whispered. 2 years ago, we had intelligence that someone inside Naval Medical was selling security information to private military contractors, floor plans, patient transfers, guard rotations. We needed an operator embedded where she could observe, someone invisible, someone no one would suspect. Hawk looked at Reese, something like pride in his eyes. Lieutenant Commander Callahan volunteered. Reese spoke quietly. Lieutenant Commander Margot Hayes has been arrested. She tipped off Black Ridge PMC about Volkov's transfer, about the security layout, everything. She's the leak. Hawk nodded. The mission was to identify the mole and protect the asset if necessary. You did both, Commander. He placed a hand on her shoulder. And Reese, what you did tonight, Marcus Grant would be proud. Reese's eyes glistened. She didn't cry, but it was close. Thank you, sir. Hawk turned to Miller. Agent, this conversation is now classified. You'll be debriefed by DOD personnel within the hour. Lieutenant Commander Callahan is coming with me. The President wants a briefing. Miller could only nod. Reese walked out of the FBI field office into the cool San Diego night. A black SUV waited at the curb, but before she got in, she stopped, took a breath. The weight she'd carried for 2 years, Marcus's death, the guilt, the hiding, it didn't vanish. Grief didn't work like that, but it lifted, shifted, became something she could carry instead of something that crushed her. She'd kept her promise to Marcus. She'd kept fighting. Admiral Hawk stood by the SUV door. You ready to come home, Commander? Reese looked up at the stars, thought of Ward 4 Bravo, of Cole and Garrett and Finn, of the men she'd saved. Yes, sir, she said. I'm ready. 3 days later, Ward 4 Bravo. The sun was shining, bright and mocking. Plywood covered the shattered windows of the solarium. The smell of fresh paint tried to mask the scent of smoke and cordite. Ward 4 Bravo was quiet. Sergeant Cole Brennan lay in bed 3, staring at the ceiling. His leg was heavily bandaged. Corporal Garrett Sullivan sat in bed 5, reading a magazine he hadn't turned the page of in an hour. Private Finn Walker was by the window, looking at his missing fingers. They'd all signed non-disclosure agreements thick enough to choke a horse. They knew what happened. They were still struggling to process who made it happen. You think she's coming back? Finn asked quietly. Cole shook his head. Ghosts don't come back, kid. She did the job. She's gone. Attention on deck. The voice came from the doorway. Not a shout, a command. Cole sat up. Standing there was a woman in full-dress whites. The uniform was impeccable, tailored, sharp. On her collar were the gold oak leaves of a lieutenant commander. On her chest, above a formidable rack of ribbons that included the Silver Star and Purple Heart, gleamed the one piece of metal that every man in that room respected above all else, the trident, the Budweiser, the eagle, anchor, and pistol of a Navy SEAL. It was Reese. Her hair was no longer in a messy bun. It was pulled back professional, regulation. The glasses were gone. She walked into the room. The sound of her heels on linoleum was rhythmic, confident. She stopped at the foot of Cole's bed. The room was dead silent. The men who had called her mouse, who had mocked her, who had questioned her competence, stared at her with a mixture of awe and something close to fear. Cole swallowed hard, looked at the trident, then up at her eyes. They were the same eyes that had looked at him over a clipboard. But now he saw the steel that had always been there. "Ma'am," Cole croaked. He tried to swing his legs out of bed to stand at attention. "As you were, Sergeant," Reese said. Her voice was warm, lacking the harsh command tone she'd used during the firefight. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a small, crumpled piece of paper. Cole recognized it immediately. the formal complaint form he'd filled out demanding her transfer for lacking the fortitude necessary for a military ward. Reese smoothed the paper out on his tray table. "I believe this belongs to you, Sergeant Brennan." Cole's face turned bright red. "Ma'am, I was an idiot. I didn't know. I swear—" "You weren't supposed to know, Cole," Reese said gently. "If you had known, I wouldn't have been doing my job. Deep cover means convincing everyone." She looked around the room, met the eyes of every man there. "You boys held the line," she said. "When the doors breached, you didn't run. You fought with bedpans and alcohol bottles against armored shooters. You protected Volkov. You protected each other." She paused. "I've served with a lot of operators, gentlemen. Tier 1 teams, the best in the world. But I'd share a foxhole with any of you any day." Garrett wiped his eye, pretending it was dust. "Even with your driving, ma'am?" Reese laughed. It was genuine. Bright. "Don't push your luck, Corporal." She stepped back, came to attention. "I'm rotating out, back to the teams, but I wanted to make sure my patients were stable before I shipped out." Cole stood on his good leg, leaned heavily against the bed frame, wincing. But he stood tall. He didn't say a word. He just threw the crispest, most respectful salute of his entire career. One by one, Garrett, Finn, and the others did the same. Reese returned the salute slowly, held it for a long beat, acknowledging the bond forged in fire and blood. "Heal up, Marines," she said. "That's an order." She did an about-face and walked toward the door. Cole watched her go until she turned the corner and vanished. He looked down at the complaint form on his table, picked it up, ripped it into tiny pieces, let them flutter into the trash can. "The mouse," he whispered, shaking his head with a grin. "God help the poor bastards who try to mess with her next." In the elevator, alone, Reese allowed herself to breathe. Really breathe. The weight she'd carried, Marcus's death, the guilt of Kandahar, the shame of hiding, it didn't disappear, it never would, but it shifted. Became something she could carry with honor instead of something that crushed her. She'd kept her promise. She'd kept fighting. The elevator doors opened to the parking garage. Admiral Hawk was waiting by a staff car. "Ready, Commander?" Reese straightened her uniform, touched the trident on her chest. "Yes, sir. Let's go home." 6 months later, Naval Special Warfare Center, Coronado. The Pacific surf crashed against the beach like it had for 1,000 years. BUD/S candidates ran past in formation, young, eager, terrified. Their instructors ran beside them, barking orders that could be heard over the roar of the ocean. Lieutenant Commander Reese Callahan stood on the sand in tactical fatigues, watching them. She taught advanced tactical casualty care now, combat medicine for operators who would see the worst the world had to offer. The students called her Professor Reaper. Behind her back, of course, she didn't mind. Her locker at the compound held a photograph, Ward 4 Bravo Marines, all healed, standing proud in their dress blues, and there in the front row, wearing a BUD/S training shirt, was Private Finn Walker. He'd enlisted in the SEAL program, inspired by the nurse who'd saved his life. Reese looked at her uniform hanging in the locker. The trident gleamed in the fluorescent light. Next to it hung a set of dog tags that weren't hers. Grant Marcus J/P01/USN. "I kept fighting, Marcus," she whispered, "just like I promised." The ocean roared. The candidates ran. The sun climbed higher over Coronado. Reese Callahan closed her locker and walked toward the sound of warriors being forged. The mouse was gone. The Reaper had come home.